Mr. Epstein.
The energy industry is the industry that powers every other industry. To the extent energy is cheap, plentiful, and reliable, human beings thrive. To the extent energy is unaffordable, scarce, or unreliable, human beings suffer. And yet, in this election year, the candidates, especially the Republican candidates, have barely discussed energy. Thus, I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the morality of energy policy. When we evaluate energy policies, such as President Obama's efforts to restrict cheap, plentiful, reliable fossil fuels and mandate solar and wind, it's worth asking, has this been tried before? The answer is much milder versions of the president's energy policy have been tried in Europe, and they've resulted in skyrocketing energy prices every time. Take Germany. Over the last decade, Germany pursued the popular ideal of running on the unreliable energy from solar and wind. But since unreliable energy can't be relied upon, it has to be propped up by reliable energy, mostly fossil fuels. The solar panels and wind turbines are an unnecessary and enormous cost to the system. The average German pays 3 to 4 times more for electricity than the average American. It's so bad that Germans have had to add a new term to the language: energy poverty. The United States should learn from the failed German experiment. Instead, our president is doubling down on it. And just as ominously, he's calling for even the poorest countries to use unreliables instead of reliables. This in a world where 3 billion people have almost no access to energy. How could this possibly be moral? The alleged justification is that fossil fuels cause climate change and should therefore be eliminated. But we need to clearly define what we mean by climate change, because while nearly everyone, the 97%, agrees that more CO2 in the atmosphere causes some climate change, it makes all the difference in the world whether that change is a mild, manageable warming or a runaway, catastrophic warming. Which is it? If we look at what has been scientifically demonstrated versus what has been speculated, the climate impact of CO2 is mild and manageable. The warming of the last 80 years has been barely more than the natural warming that occurred in the 80 years before that, when there were virtually no CO2 emissions. From a geological perspective, both CO2 levels and temperatures are very low. There is no perfect amount of CO2 or perfect average temperature, although higher CO2 levels do create more plant growth, and higher temperatures do lower mortality rates. To be sure, many prominent scientists and organizations predict catastrophe, but this is wild speculation, and it's nothing new. Indeed, many of today's thought leaders have been falsely predicting catastrophe for decades. 30 years ago, NASA climate leader James Hansen predicted that temperatures would rise by 2 to 4 degrees between 2000 and 2010. Instead, depending on which temperature data set you consult, they rose only slightly or not at all. 30 years ago, President Obama's top science advisor, John Holdren, predicted that by now we'd be approaching 1 billion CO2-related deaths from famine. Instead, famine has plummeted. More broadly, climate-related deaths, deaths from extreme heat, extreme cold, storms, drought, and floods, have decreased at a rate of 50% since the 1980s and 98% since major CO2 emissions began 80 years ago. How is it possible that we're safer than ever from the climate? Because while fossil fuel use has only a mild warming impact, it has an enormous protecting impact. Nature doesn't give us a stable, safe climate that we make dangerous. It gives us an ever-changing, dangerous climate that we need to make safe. And the driver behind sturdy buildings, affordable heating and air conditioning, drought relief, and everything else that keeps us safe from climate is cheap, plentiful, reliable energy, overwhelmingly from fossil fuels. Thus, the president's anti-fossil fuel policies would harm billions of lives economically and make them more vulnerable to nature's ever-present climate danger. Using more fossil fuels, along with other cheap, plentiful, reliable sources, such as nuclear and hydro, also opposed by most of the environmentalist movement, is a moral imperative. Now, I realize that many of you have fought to restrict fossil fuel use, and it can be politically difficult to change one's stand, but if you continue on your current path, you will cause billions of people to suffer unnecessarily. I hope you reconsider your position, and no matter how politically difficult it is, I hope you change your stand.